Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on another Speaker Series episode as we have continued every Thursday at 5 live. We are now with awesome guests from the United Kingdom, from Aston Martin Lagonda. We have Simon Lane, who oversees the special projects and Q division, and I think he is like James Bond, I think he's the real James Bond.
I don't think my wife thinks that.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
And we also have Fraser Dunn, the chief engineer of the Q division of special projects at Aston Martin, who oversees some really, really special projects. And it's actually impressive to see Fraser join us. He's behind the scenes doing a lot of the heavy lifting and has managing a team of about 40 people in a special division at the factory, doing all the coolest things, in my opinion. So we'll get to chat for a while. Guys, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you.
No problem. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Yeah, so I hope you guys are well, and I'm getting things back up and going in the next month or two, I guess. But behind the scenes, I imagine there's plenty for you guys to do to vamp up these projects, and could only imagine you guys are working on the future ahead. Simon, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and what your role is with Aston Martin?
Yeah, sure. So I'm responsible for anything that isn't on the production line in Gaydon or St Athan from a sales and marketing perspective. So what we would call special projects. So anything from the Valkyrie to Valhalla to the V12 Speedster, which is our newest special. And then also the continuation cars. So the one that we're building this year is the DB5 Goldfinger continuation, which has all the gadgets from the original Goldfinger car re-engineered to modern standards in it. So that's really exciting. And then I'm also responsible for Q, which is the bespoke commissioning service within Aston Martin. And we'll do anything from special color leather or a special color paint, right up to a complete bespoke one-off car.
Wow, that's quite impressive. And Fraser, what's going on in your special department? How's everything with you guys?
It's essentially very similar to Simon, other than he gets them out the door and I load the hopper for him, essentially. My team are kind of instrumental in delivering the engineering for all the special projects Aston Martin do. So a lot of them are derivative vehicles. We call them legacy programs. So they're the kind of cars that are based on the kind of the base product. So things like the Zagatos, they start life, the base vehicle that we base those vehicles on is an existent vehicle. And then that goes all the way through to complete new creations, such as the Valkyrie or the Vulcans, as behind you. And then also the heritage products that also Simon's just suggested. So, and then we also get involved in some cool stuff like supporting the Eon, the film company, with things like the Bond cars and stuff. So, and then the race cars at the Nürburgring. Loads of stuff, all the cool stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Fraser, how did you get started in the world of automotive and where you are today?
I went to university to study automotive engineering specifically, and you kind of apply for your placement year where you have to go to industry, and I applied to Aston Martin and managed to get the gig, and I have never left. So yeah, I'm held prisoner. I've been there for 18 years now.
Wow, it's a good run and good years ahead. There's always something special that you guys are brewing up. I always found quite fascinating that as a company that builds great sports cars, you guys have done all types of fun, kitschy little projects. And one of them specifically, I know this is going to be interesting to dive in on this. Does this ring a bell?
Yeah, Super Signet.
Yeah, what is that? Can you tell us a little bit about that and what it is?
Yeah, I mean that project actually was in the making for quite some time. It started, some guys that I worked with started that probably, must be 8 years ago, and they did the shell. It had the roll cage in it, and they were going to do what the car is, which is essentially it's got it's got the drive line, albeit very shortened from a V8 Vantage. So it's got a V8, 4.7 litre V8 with a I think it's actually got the 7-speed paddle shift, the ASM gearbox in it. So yeah, it's quite lively.
Yeah, it's fun. It's amazing that a little car, you guys put such a big engine in, and it just shows you that you have some of these kind of unique requests, and you guys do grant them and make it happen. So kind of a fun thing to see.
We have a follow-up project to that, which is currently in build, which is based around a Vulcan platform, but has a more powerful version of the Vulcan and 177 engine. So it's an 836 horsepower naturally aspirated V12 driving through a manual gearbox. So it has the Vulcan exhaust system, or Vulcan type exhaust system with a side exit exhaust, and a completely bespoke carbon fiber body and interior. So I can't tell you any more about it right now, but you're going to see it unveiled in a couple of months' time, and it really is a wild car. And it's another example of what we can do as key by Aston Martin. If you want to go to that level and go to a completely one-off car, then we can do that.
Very neat. Speaking of, you guys deal with some of the most special requests of options to engineering. What is perhaps one of the most wild requests that you think you have received, during time or heard of, other than something like this? Anything that's just kind of caught your eye or you remember quite well?
Go, Fraser. You want to start?
Yeah, we've had various. I mean, some of them never actually come to life, unfortunately, and we kind of go through various kind of concept phases with certain kind of high net worth customers, and then sometimes they never see the light of day, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that the one that Simon's just said is the most recent, so the one that sticks kind of closely to mind to think of, but yeah, it's I'd say the most recent one's probably the best one when you see it. It's literally the quintessential kind of for me what Aston Martin should be about, which is the kind of the thug in a dinner jacket kind of vehicle. It's kind of extremely classy, but with ridiculous amounts of power, and it's about driving experience. So
we look forward to seeing that, and we'll stay tuned for that. Fun.
If I come to the other end of the scale, so the other end of the scale, we have a client who's asked us to. He's managed to source some moon rock, and has asked us to turn that into a paint, or put it into a paint and paint his car with it. So that's a fairly recent one that we're working on at the moment. But that's an example of the kind of requests that we get fairly regularly in Q, actually, for colour and trim, exclusive colour and trim.
Fascinating. We've heard about that. The crushed moon rock Valkyrie, and with a special red.
There's a Valkyrie with a livery inspired by the owner's dogs as well, which is one of my favourites.
That would be fun. We have someone listening who wanted to do a Bernadette's Mountain Dog inspired Valkyrie, but he chose something cooler. So
okay.
Speaking of the Valkyrie, I understand your guys are going through a testing process on that car. We have a couple of Valkyrie deposit holders listening today who are very excited for their cars, and we cannot wait. Where are you guys on the process with that at this given moment?
On the testing?
Yeah, on testing of Valkyrie.
Yeah, it's obviously with the current kind of pandemic crisis, things are getting difficult. So there's been a few kind of test locations have been closed, which are now opening in places like Idiada in Spain. So things are kind of slightly challenging at the moment, just due to what's going on. But Beyond that, the cars are running. We've got 4 of the prototypes up and running at the moment. The 5th one should be finished and running in the next couple of weeks. So they're kind of running kind of a broad spectrum of activities at the moment. So the main focus, due to you have to kind of stack up the development process based around kind of what takes the longest and what have you. So one of the biggest tasks is to get the engine that's in this car calibrated. So that's getting into, it works to all the emissions requirements and meets all the homologation requirements that needs to be done. So the majority of the work at the moment is being based around the calibration of the engine and the calibration of the gearbox and drivability. And then literally in the last kind of week, we are starting to kind of get into doing the kind of the dynamics work. So this is where we kind of turn on all the magic that Red Bull have kind of pushed into the program with their kind of huge amounts of simulation expertise. So this is all the active systems on the car. So the car has, active, what we call active platform. So it's a fully active suspension system. So damping's active, but also ride height's active, and it's active roll control, pitch control. And it runs on this kind of crazy clever algorithm that the guys have written. And then you've also, on top of that's supporting the active aero. So they've started to kind of start making that work, and kind of, it's a bit clumsy at the moment because it's the first week, but they're doing a load of work on rigs, and they're getting data, and then that data then gets fed back, and then they kind of they optimize it, and it's coming along. But yeah.
How does the car feel? Is it driving this car? It's so much anticipation from an Adrian Newey Formula One engineered project with a V12 as monstrous as so. What does it feel like?
It's quick. It's very quick. That's the simple thing. It's very, very fast, and at the moment they're kind of like for mere mortals such as myself, as opposed to some of the test drivers. It's kind of, because you know that the car's not fully developed yet. You have to kind of take it kind of relatively easy compared to what the pros can do. But yeah, it's in a straight line. It's terrifyingly quick. It's 1,000 horsepower.
That's no joke.
And that's just from the petrol bit.
Yeah.
which has to be one of the best sounding engines ever.
It sounds incredible. It's kind of goosebumps kind of noises outside.
It's 1990s Formula One, isn't it? It's that screaming V12. It's just amazing.
Very neat. And behind me is another iconic project that you guys showed at the Geneva Motor Show back in 2000, and I believe it was 19, perhaps.
Yeah, March last year.
Yeah, the 003 project. Any updates on that as well as you guys progress? It's probably years down the road, but
yeah, it's another really, really exciting project, and it's the next step in our mid-engine car story. So if Valkyrie, I'm sure Fraser will back me up, or will say the same thing. Valkyrie is the closest thing to a Formula One car for the road that there's ever been, and the cockpit is very snug. Everywhere where we've been able to take weight out of the car, we've done that. So it's not a car that's full of creature comforts. It's designed to go very, very fast. Valhalla takes lots and lots of the learning from Valkyrie, but puts it into a package that's a bit easier to live with. There's a bit more room in the cabin, and it has some really trick new tech, obviously, with the hybrid powertrain that we're putting into this car, and a completely new V6 engine. Again, some new aerodynamics, which Fraser would be better qualified to talk about than I can. But the flex foil aero that's on that car is a technology that's come from aerospace, and it's a really, really exciting car. And obviously behind that, we've then got the new Vanquish, which will be the third mid-engine car. So we'll have a really comprehensive mid-engine car lineup, and Andy Palmer and the senior team, when we first talked about going into the world of mid-engine cars, decided the right thing to do was to start at the very top and build what's, I think, the automotive landmark of this generation of hypercars. I mean, it's right at the top of the tree. So you build the very best car, and you take the learning from that, and then you build the next one and the next one, and that's what we're doing. So, Fraser.
Yeah, I'd kind of put it as if you're kind of to line the cars up, I'd say Valkyrie was strapping herself to a space shuttle, and the 003 program is more akin to getting in first class in Concorde. So.
They're quite unique and different power plants, but a similar methodology of extreme weight, lighting fast, and state-of-the-art materials. We're excited to see that project progress. It's fascinating how much you guys have done behind the scenes to create all these special projects and so forth. And you guys are actually working on something currently that's quite neat, which is the new V12 Speedster project, which is an open-top car with a power plant perhaps that would be utilized with the DBS, maybe a little more power as well. We don't get to often hear all the inner scoops of what's going on with this because it's so fresh. Simon, and can you talk a little bit more about this car? And
yeah, it's going to be an awesome car. You imagine taking our smallest chassis, so the Vantage Roadster platform, and then putting our biggest engine in it. So it's got our twin turbo 5.2 litre V12 engine, producing around 700 horsepower, in a car that has no roof, no windscreen. It's going to be a very, very exciting car to drive. It's a full carbon fibre body, and the interior is again highly bespoke. And we're only going to build 88 of these, so it's a very, very low number of cars that we're building. There are only 10 coming to the USA, so a very, very exclusive car in the US. Unfortunately, because of the very strict homologation rules in the US, we can't homologate the car for road use in the USA. We would have to do a number of changes to the car in order to do that, which in our view was going to ruin the concept of the car, putting a windscreen on it and defroster and windscreen and what the various other things that we were going to have to change to it. So it's coming as track only. But it will be a really, really exciting thing to own and a great, great track car.
Fascinating. There is some unique collaboration that's taking place with the F-18 and Boeing. Would you be able to give us any information on that? And
that's correct. For those of you that have looked at the images of the car that we unveiled, you'll see, if you look up close, there are a number of nods to the F-18 fighter jet from Boeing. That's really a nod to what's coming in the future. So exclusively for this group, I'm going to tell you the reason why. And the reason why is because we are featured in the new Top Gun Maverick film. The car that's featured in the Top Gun Maverick film is actually the DBR1. But the V12 Speedster takes its lineage from the DBR1. If you look at the rose to the shape of that car, and then the CC100, which we did for our centenary, and then V12 Speedster, there's a very clear lineage there. And so the car will be available in two halo specifications, one being the FA-18 Top Gun Maverick spec, and the other one being a DBR1 spec. The Top Gun Maverick element wasn't on the car when we launched it, and that's because we were just a little bit too far away from the film coming out. And for those of you that are following the launch of new movies this year, this movie and the other big film that we were in, the new Bond film, have both been delayed quite significantly. So Bond has gone back to November, and Top Gun Maverick has gone back to December. But come next month, we'll be in a position to confidentially show the full Top Gun Maverick specification and DBR1 spec to customers that have ordered these cars and let them see how that spec is going to look on their car. Very exciting. And the hard model So the car that you can see the pictures of there, that's a full-size model. That's coming over to the US at the end of May, and it's going to do a tour around the USA, including visiting the FA18 plant on its way around. So I think we're going to get some images of it with an FA18. Should be pretty cool.
Fascinating. We can't wait to share with our customers as well.
Yeah,
there's an opportunity.
Yes,
cool
because I think it's coming to Millers. So yeah, don't miss that opportunity. I think it's going to come to you guys for a few days.
We're quite excited about it, and I want to talk about some other unique projects that you guys have been involved with. One specifically, one that caught our eye. We were fortunate to be able to deliver one with your kind assistance in your relationship. This is a project that you spearheaded with Aston Martin Cambridge when you were with that program. Could you tell us a little bit more about this unique collaboration, what you guys did, what kind of experiences you offer when you do special projects like this? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're right. In my former life, I ran an Aston Martin dealership in England before I came to work for Aston Martin. And the dealership that I ran, we commissioned a number of special projects through Q by Aston Martin, which is part of the reason why I ended up in this job, thankfully. And I had this idea 3 or 4 years ago around the upcoming 60th anniversary of Aston Martin's famous 1-2 Le Mans win in 1959. So very, very quick version of the story. Aston Martin went out with 4 cars in 1959. 3 cars started the race, and the strategy was that Sir Stirling Moss, who obviously very recently passed away, he was an incredible driver, and his brief was to be the rabbit and try and outdrive the Ferraris. Even though the team knew that the car wasn't quite as quick as the Ferraris, he was tasked to just literally drive the wheels off his car, knowing that it would probably break and not make it through the race, but in the hope that it would break the Ferraris. And that's what happened. And so eventually both Ferraris retired, and that left the way for the 2 DBR1s behind, which had been keeping a steady pace, and they just took the lead, and the car that won by 25 laps after 24 hours. So it was an amazing moment for the company. It's the only time that we've ever had an outright win at Le Mans, and so it was a huge moment for us to celebrate 60 years since that victory. So I approached Aston Martin and said, look, I've got this idea. I'd like to build 24 DBS Superleggera to a very specific specification to celebrate the DBR1 and to celebrate that victory. And I'd like to take them all out to Le Mans, and I'd like to hand them over to the owners on the grid at Le Mans. And I'd like them all to be able to do a parade lap around the circuit. And so it took a lot of work. I mean, this was a year and a half in the planning. And we hired a chateau, which was about a 45-minute drive away from the circuit, so a bit too far to drive in and out every day. So we chartered 6 helicopters with a 7th backup to fly people in and out each day. And they had an amazing experience. They got to collect their cars on the grid the day before the race. So on the Friday, we recreated the 1959 start. So we had all the cars reversed up against the pit lane wall, and all the owners walked out onto the track, and we recreated the flag drop start, and they all ran towards their cars, and we caught that on camera. And then the next day they came back, and their cars were all waiting for them to go out and do a parade lap just before the start of the race. So they went out behind the DBR1, and they did a parade lap in front of a full Le Mans crowd. And literally as they peeled off, the race started. So it was quite a thing. It was quite a thing, and you're right. You've supplied the one car that we supplied into the US came in via Millers, and is now with its owner in the US, and that's the only one that's in the USA. There are a number in Europe. Most of them are in the UK.
Yeah, so it's beautiful collaboration. Thanks for telling us about it. We also encourage. We're getting some questions in currently now, and continue to do so. We hope to talk a bit about that in the session after we cover some of these pre-done questions. I wanted to chat with you guys about James Bond. You know, it's such an iconic collaboration that you guys have. You know, it's almost has to be an Aston Martin in every Bond film to keep the tradition alive. I know there's a couple special Astons in this film. What are Fraser? What's your favorite Bond film in history?
I don't know if this is a leading question. I worked on the Quantum of Solace, so that was 11 years ago. So I went and supported that film, and there we go.
You can't stop there.
There it is.
Yeah. So I googled your name, and I was like, is this the same Fraser Dunn who's 29 years old, who was knocked unconscious in Lake Garda and had a bad accident? I was like, I don't know if I should bring this up, but I think I remember reading about this.
It was arguably the best day of my life. It was a good day. So you don't get to live through stuff like that often. So yeah, it was a good one.
So were you the stunt driver for this car?
No, not at all. No, it was a kind of. I had been there for probably about 5 or 6 weeks at that point, and I got a phone call the night before from the guy that runs our kind of press cars and brand communications and stuff, and he said, "Oh, Fraser, there's a car on its way down to Italy now." So, okay. He goes, "It should be there tonight. It needs to be a press conference tomorrow evening. Can you speak to this guy and find out what it needs to do?" Okay, cool. So I did all that stuff, and we kind of discussed it. And the only way to get the car to where it needed to be that evening was for me to drive it to the other side of set before filming and before everything got set up in the morning. So it was a very early start and go and drive to the other side of the set. And I went and picked the car up at maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, and the rain was stotting off the road. It was torrential rain. And I got in the car and I started driving out of Riva del Garda, down the side of Lake Garda. And then there's a small town called Torbole. Came out of Torbole, and basically there's a famous piece of road where I went off. A truck went off apparently about 5 years earlier, and they never recovered the truck or the driver. And the reason is that when it rains torrentially in that piece of road, there's a waterfall runs down the kind of the sheer rock face, and it basically runs a kind of a river across the road, but at a funny angle, and you basically get you get split view, so the car gets a kind of a yaw angle on it. So yeah, the car went sideways, and then it kind of you can see what happened next. So it was an incident due to natural circumstances and lack of driver talent, and I went swimming in a car. So it was quite a big shunt.
Well,
I don't know if you can see the perspective there, but the wall that I went off was that was a 12-meter wall. So,
well, it's history. It's kind of a unique story. It's hard to bring it up if you're uncomfortable about it, but you were a part of Aston history.
Yes.
But there's so many cool. What is your favorite Aston film? Other than that, is there or a Bond? Who's your favorite Bond?
I would say my favorite Bond would have to be Roger Moore, just because he's kind of slapstick Bond. I think it's all a bit too serious nowadays, but it's all a bit unrealistic at the same time. So I think it was more fun back in the day.
Yeah, true. Simon, what about you? What's your favorite Bond man?
I mean, my favourite Bond of the recent films definitely would be Skyfall. I just absolutely love that the scenes in Scotland, particularly the scene with the DB5 where he's driving it through that part of Scotland. I mean, I've driven that road. It is awesome. So and just that whole film, I thought was, of all the modern Bond films, was the one that felt the most like a proper traditional Bond film. And then of the older films, I know it's going to sound cheesy, but probably the Sean Connery films for me are still proper James Bond. They're still the ones that I remember from growing up watching those films, and Sean Connery being such a cool dude. So definitely any of the Connery films.
Yeah, there's a lot of classics out there. So we can't wait to see the new one. But while we talk a little Bond, we'll switch gears a little bit. You know, there's speaking of the past as well. This is a very unique project to come out of your great company. Is the DB4 GT Zagato collaboration, and then the DBS GTZ. You guys are making 19 of each copy, and we commend you on all your hard work on this. What are you guys building the new DBS GTZ at this time, or soon to be?
So job one is in August. So job one, is a term that we use for the start of the production cars. So we've already built some prototypes. Fraser knows all about those far more than I do. But yeah, we start building the first customer cars in August, and we aim to be ready to ship those cars by November. So they'll be being shipped towards the end of the year. Fraser, do you want to talk a bit more about the?
Yeah. So I mean, from my point of view, both cars from an engineering standpoint are very, very interesting projects to be involved in. So obviously starting with the kind of the more modern offering, the kind of the DBS Zagato. It's just got a load of really cool new tech on it. Are we allowed to tell about? I assume we're allowed to say all the things that are on the car.
Yes. Yeah, you can.
So yeah, it has no rear window, and it has this kind of rear view camera system, which is it's mind-bogglingly clever, because there's been a lot of camera systems on offer over the past kind of 4 or 5 years that we've investigated, and none of them never really kind of do the job as you would want it to. However, the one in this car, you would swear there was a rear window, because you look at where there is a rear view mirror, and what you see is exactly the same as what you'd expect to see if there was a window there. So it's got that, and then the grille, the front grille, is the first to market in the world of a kind of an active grille, which kind of opens and closes. Very interesting kind of engineering task to be put on us. And we're kind of going through the last stages of validating all that stuff. And then on top of that, just the car is, it's a full carbon body, and then it's got a longer wheelbase than the standard DBS. So the kind of the distance from the front of the windscreen to the front wheel is longer. So there's a load of kind of neat things on there that you could bore people about for hours. The small changes that have been made. So it's very much its own vehicle. And then
it's 138 individual diamonds, I think, in the front grille.
Yeah. I don't know the number, but yeah, it's probably around that kind of number. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. So when you start the car up, it almost looks like it flutters. It's the most amazing effect. And a bit more power, like all the Zagatos, is 750 horsepower.
Yeah.
So a lot of power. There's something that I've noticed about Aston Martin. You guys have a certain type of passion and loyalty to the brand. I've seen this in a lot of the owners and people involved in it. What to you, perhaps Simon, what does Aston Martin mean to you?
What does it mean to me? I mean, clearly being a Brit, I'm very proud of the fact that it's a British company, and I think when you look around the rest of the world, every brand has its USPs, but Aston Martin, number one, is beautiful. I mean, everything that we do, every car we build is beautiful, and it's always where the design process starts, is proportion and making beautiful things inside and out. And there are things within Aston Martin that I really love, like our truth of materials, mantra, which basically means if it looks like metal, it is metal. If it looks like leather, it is leather, and you really see that in the finish of our cars. So that's probably what it means to me. Is definitely it's beauty. It would be the first thing. Fraser.
Similarly, probably kind of along the same lines. For me, I've always, even as a young boy, the kind of the difference between, the one thing that I think that people need to bear in mind with luxury products, and when you get into supercars and what have you, is that you are competing with the other cars in a certain way, but at the same time you should never try and be the same as the other companies, because you should stick close to what you're good at. And I think that the thing that Aston Martin are absolutely incredible at is detail. I think that if you look in the cars, like if you look at in the 177 that's on the picture there, if you look in the engine bay, it's just the attention to detail, the kind of the detail of the interiors, and the choice of leathers, and it is all about quality. Whereas the Ferraris, they're very good at making kind of lightweight sports cars, but and they've always, their big mantra has always been about you buy the engine and you get the car for free. And from my point of view, I think that still stands, because the kind of the level of quality in the kind of the Italian brand is never quite as good as what we produce. So from my point of view, it's quality and style, really.
Yeah, their cars are just timeless, and they give you a certain feel and emotion that others are quite different from. So quite fascinating. And speaking of another car that must have been quite of a challenge to achieve it, but to make a sport utility on an Aston Martin, and have the same ethos would be a challenge. But I think you guys completely nailed it. We were fortunate to have the show car here, and the car looks like an Aston Martin. It feels like an Aston Martin, and can't wait for the next kind of future wave of this new segment.
It has poise, doesn't it? It has poise. The DBX. Yeah. When you look at all the other big luxury SUVs that are out there, I worked with Porsche for a long time before I came to Aston. I think the Cayenne for a long time has been a fantastic benchmark in terms of being able to make an SUV that kind of drives like a car. It was definitely one of the benchmarks that we looked at in the development of DBX. But to make an SUV beautiful is really hard. And so what I just said about beauty, when you look at the DBX, certainly my reaction when I first saw the car, and I think most people's reaction is, wow, that's a really good-looking, well-proportioned car. Having been out in the car on track and off-road, it's unbelievably capable as well, and it's got tons of room in the back, more room than the Cayenne I just mentioned. But it sticks with that principle of being beautiful.
What do you guys expect that we can do with Q on the DBX, and how can we personalize these cars?
So that first car that you showed, that you're showing the image of there, that's a car that we did for the Geneva Motor Show, which unfortunately the show was stillborn. It was cancelled literally the very last moment. That car was actually in a truck ready to go onto the show stand. So we brought it back along with some of the other cars, the V12 Speedster that we showed you a minute ago, back to Gaydon, and we unveiled the cars in the atrium at Gaydon. That car, we designed it to kind of just give customers some idea of some of the things that you could personalize on DBX. So that particular color is satin xenon grey. It's obviously a key color. The wheel finish, the gloss black wheel finish is a key finish. But the stuff, the parts on that car that I love the most are the boot floor. So I'll change the word boot to trunk, remembering my audience. So the trunk floor, when you open the trunk, we can provide a variety of finishes, and the one that's in that car is a carbon boot floor. It looks really, really beautiful. And then inside the car on the center console, there's spun carbon, machined carbon, that's been the carbon's been spun and then machined back, and it's a really, really unique finish. I haven't seen anybody else do this before. We've done it inside this car. So they're just some of the ideas. What else could you do? I mean, really, through Q, the possibilities are limitless. Really, we've talked about doing things like a bespoke graphic on there's a roller blind for the panoramic roof that we could do various things with. We could perforate it to let little bits of light through. We could put a whole kind of graphic on there. There are a myriad of other things that we could do inside the car. Really, it's our job to make customers' dreams and ideas come into reality. That's what we love doing. So we love taking their ideas and then trying to make them into something real.
We're excited for DBX, and seeing these cars on the road. They're striking and actually a lot more spacious than one would expect.
Well, I can tell you that job one started this week. So we built so far we've been building various stages of pre-production cars, but this week the very first chassis and body for production car went into build. So we are now building production DBXs. So very exciting for us.
Awesome. I wanted to take an opportunity to do a couple of questions with some great guests who are listening. One would be Robert Patch. We're going to pull him in for a great question. He's an avid Aston fan and enthusiast and owner. So we'll get Rob on here, and if anyone else even has questions, please continue to send them in. We'd love to chat, and as long as they're appropriate. It looks like we have Rob Patch. We see his beautiful professional photo on the screen. That's great.
Wait, hold on. Because you have me on my work one here, so just hold on. There we go. I have two Zooms, one for business and one for personal. So good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for being available here. I have one question for you. I'm really curious, as a Zagato owner, the spectacular Vanquish Zagato series that you guys did that really was unique in the sense of a series that was done over, four or 5 years. Curious about the concept. What was the motivation to have not just one, but four? And as well as the shooting brake, which I find very intriguing. And I had one technical question about the length of the wheelbase, which I think is a slightly longer one than the other three. I may be wrong about that, but would love to hear your thoughts about the whole program and the thought process. And I would say also, I'm curious, when you do something of that level of complexity in design and engineering in terms of different body designs, what's the collaboration process with the House of Zagato? How does that come together? What are some of the challenges?
Well, I can probably talk about the collaboration bit if you want to talk about the build of the car.
Yeah. Do you want to start with the collaboration bit, and then I'll
Okay. The collaboration. So, I mean, we have a relationship with Zagato going back to 1960, I think. It's a very close relationship with the Zagato family. The Vanquish Zagato series effectively were licensed built. So Zagato didn't build the cars, but they were involved in the concept and the design of the car and the approval of the design. They certainly were involved with, and they're very proud. They continue to be very proud, I know, of the relationship with Aston Martin. So, do you want to talk about the?
So kind of going into kind of one of the questions, just kind of leads into the kind of the discussion about the other part, is the reason for 4 cars is that it's essentially the kind of the all 4 derivatives that you can possibly spin out of the kind of the quartet that we offered. So obviously the base vehicle being the Vanquish, there's obviously 2 that line up straight away, which is obviously the coupe and the convertible. And then there was a demand from customers requesting that we offered a speedster, and I think that for the actual speedster that there was less made, wasn't it, Simon?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that was just kind of more against the demand. And then at the same time, when we were kind of looking at all the options of the way we could do things, the kind of the shooting brake thing was something that I was quite excited about. Just because it's a cool car. It's just different. It's a bit like the Ferrari FF. I think it's kind of one of the coolest cars in their stable. Yeah, we kind of got into kind of working out how you'd go about doing that. And obviously, if you were to kind of look in the boot of the coupe, in the trunk of the coupe, you'll see that there's a kind of a bit of a ledge that goes up, and that ledge is essentially where the fuel tank lives in the standard Vanquish. And when you look at it, and then you look at the roof line, the way it drops away in the standard, on the shooting brake, and you look at the package, all of a sudden you'd have this kind of like mountain range of a fuel tank that kind of lives where you kind of showing that you've got a load space. It's kind of like, look at me, I've got a shooting brake, but I haven't really got much space in there because I've got a fuel tank. So the solution was that we utilized the kind of the whole rear body structure from the Rapide, because the Rapide, obviously, that was kind of very, very kind of beneficial real estate in the offering for that vehicle. But in doing that, one of the differences is that it's tiny. I think that the difference in wheelbase is like about 100. It might not even be 100 mil. It's like 90 mil or something. And the reason is that on the Vanquish, on the coupe, it's got leading drive shafts. So if you looked at where the diff output flanges are, the drive shafts actually point slightly forwards to the wheels, and on a Rapide they actually trail a little bit, and that's the difference. That's why it's all driven by the rear subframe, and to be able to achieve a flat load area using the Rapide rear subframe. Interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting background.
So I think you're right that the shooting brake for me, and I know for a lot of my colleagues, is the one that's because it's so different from not only the other cars but anything else we've ever built. It's probably going to be in future years. I think it'll be the most collectible because it's just such an unusual car.
Well, I hope so.
Have you got the shooting brake?
I do, and actually, I met Andre Zagato when he was in the States, and he actually signed the engine for me. So it was kind of a special touch, but it is an outrageous design and concept, and it certainly gets a lot of looks.
Yeah.
So, really a great. That was a great series and additions. It's really great to see that collaboration, and the execution is quite extraordinary and certainly notable for Aston Martin.
Great.
Thank you so much, Rob, for joining us. We can't wait to see you on the road with your shooting brake. So
you in the lead, Evan.
Thanks, champ. We've got some other great questions. One from Cynthia Koppelman, who's going to join us this evening. So let's pull on Cindy in this great conversation, and then we continue to encourage you all to ask questions that are appropriate, because we have seen some that are not all as relevant.
Hi, Cindy.
Simon, cheers. Fraser, cheers. Patch, why don't you have any Aston Martin clothing on?
So, Cindy, what are you going to ask us?
So I go to Simon, I go to Fraser, and you gave my heart a little flutter about this 835 horsepower manual gearbox car, which I assume is not coming to North America.
No, it was commissioned by a Belgian customer, and so he's been involved all the way through, and is very excited about taking delivery. Sadly, we were expecting to have the car ready for him to go up the hill at Goodwood in it, and obviously the Goodwood Festival of Speed has been cancelled. So we're going to have to figure out another event for him to have the car at, because we're very keen to kind of showcase it. But Cindy, if you'd like to talk to us about commissioning another wild one-off car, I'm sure we'd be very happy to talk to you about it.
Well, I sit here and I think, what is the future of the manual gearbox for North America?
Yep, that's a very good point.
Fraser, I think that's more Fraser than Simon's, because Simon will sell it. But Fraser, you got to build it.
Yeah. So it's something that kind of sits very kind of close to. Again, I'm kind of a bit old school when it comes to what I think people buy cars for from the point of view of enjoyment. I think that certain vehicles, if you're gonna have a DBX, I think you'd be mad to think that you'd want to stick a gear stick in it. But on the drivers' cars, like the ones that you want to get kind of a visceral driving experience out of, I think that we should always offer a manual, and it is something that we're currently working on against our current product ranges. How can we offer manuals? So obviously we offer on the V8 at the moment on the Vantage. But there are options that we're looking at. So one of the biggest tasks is against the power outputs of the V12 engine, and how we can facilitate a manual gearbox for that. But it's being looked at.
I think it's very important, and I think you cannot forget about North America.
Good.
Noted.
That's it.
What a good question, Cindy. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you on the road.
Thanks, Evan.
All right. Thank you again. So just to continue some interesting questions that we've received, to go back in time a little bit, Fraser, what was your dream job growing up?
I didn't really think of it as kind of. I never kind of thought about dream job. I just knew that I always wanted to kind of just work with cars. So I guess it was doing what I'm doing.
It's awesome. It's a beautiful thing. What about you, Simon?
I wanted to follow my father's footsteps and be a fast jet pilot, but by the time I wanted to apply to go into the Air Force it was a lot smaller than it was when he joined, which meant someone with my IQ level was never going to get into a fast jet. So I ended up going into my other passion, which was cars, and I guess of all the jobs that I could be doing in the automotive world, this is a dream job. Let's be honest. Looking up the queue and special projects for Aston Martin, it's a very exciting job. Very lucky.
That's lovely. So another interesting question we received is, Fraser, you get to work on all these really creative things, experimental in a sense. Is there something you really want to do, or some kind of fantasy within something that you want to see from Aston Martin, something in your wildest imagination?
My kind of dream kind of project at the moment is actually kind of completely simplifying the kind of the car. I think that the kind of the advent of EV and electric cars is very real. I think that's on the horizon, and I think that from my point of view, I think that a very pure vehicle that's based around lightweight aerodynamics and it is all about conservation of energy. It's all about efficiency. It's something that really interests me at the moment, and I think that's where the kind of the whole industry will be forced to go in the not too distant future.
Yeah, it's quite. It's nice to hear that. And what about you, Simon? Anything you would wish and dream to see within the brand in your wildest imagination?
What I'd love to see in the brands, I guess, probably sort of touching on what Fraser was talking about. We unveiled a concept at the Farnborough Air Show a couple of years ago, which was effectively a flying Aston Martin, and it was a really a real kind of look into the future, how future travel might look like, and I'd love to see us take that project a few steps further, but we'll have to see. It's not in our product plan at the moment. Let's put it that way.
So you guys get to drive cool cars for a living. Do you guys own any cars yourselves? Do you have a toy at home or something that you enjoy to drive on the weekends?
Yeah. Do you want to start, Fraser, or shall I?
Yeah, I'll start. I haven't got an Aston at the moment. I did up until probably about 6 months ago. I was driving a V8 DB11. Currently, I'm driving Mercedes company cars, but I have an old Porsche 964 in the garage.
Proper. Good car.
A cool 911.
Yeah.
I love it. And you, Simon?
Yeah, I have. So my daily driver at the moment is a Rapide AMR, which I really love. And then other cars, I have a 1989 BMW 635 CSI Highline, which is it's sitting in my garage. So I had one owner before me, and I'm hoping the values of these cars are on the up. And then before that, I was a bit like Fraser. In fact, I've got a picture of it here. Show you. So this is what I used to have until I had children. I had that. That's my wife driving it. Yeah, I had an old 911. So I used to work for Porsche, as we mentioned earlier, and I still think they're great cars, but they're not as beautiful as Aston Martins, let's be honest.
I guess this is really about you guys, but I have always wanted a Porsche as well. And my boss says, remember who butters your bread. So I don't drive Porsches. I do drive an Aston Martin Vantage every day in cobalt blue, which I now call healthcare blue. So it's been a perfect color to drive these days. But what a fun car! The new Vantage has been a very soulful and fun car to rip around in, and excited to see the new Roadster, which we'll see just perhaps a little later in the year.
It's really cool, and what the engineering team have done with the roof, the roof falls down in less than 8 seconds, and it's really neat the way the roof falls down, and I think you can activate it up to 30 miles an hour, so you can raise or lower it whilst you're on the move. But it's a really neat solution, and it's meant that the space in the trunk is a lot bigger than the old car. You'll see that when they start coming through.
Fun. There's one project I wanted to go back on that I think during times like this, it's an experience-based activity. And you guys, if my memory serves me right, you guys made 24 Vulcans.
Yeah.
Which was just such a cool, fun, raw, wild race car. We look after the car that's in the front, which was, I think, on the show Top Gear, where Jeremy Clarkson, I think, was ripping around.
Chris Harris. I think it was Chris in that. Yeah, Chris Harris.
Oh, Chris Harris was driving it. Very fun. I really would love to see you guys get back and get these Vulcans, together again and run them. The sound is just intoxicating. Fraser, I think if what I read online, you were involved as well in overseeing some of the development and testing and.
Yeah, I mean it started off with just kind of coming up with things to do. The whole project actually started because the only part that's shared with a 177 is the kind of the lower tub. And it all started off in the fact that we had a few prototype 177s, and it just seemed a shame that they couldn't be sold, and they were just going to go to essentially just kind of rot in storage and never be used. And I tried to persuade my boss into why can't we make these this kind of handful of cars into kind of race 177s. And then we kind of discussed it and worked out how you could possibly do it. And then it then went to the kind of the board, and everyone said, well, why would we do it the 177? Why don't we do a new car? And then you then kind of get into it, and you kind of get into the business case, and then that evolves. And then obviously to make it more saleable, you have to do more, and you do more, and you do more. And then, we ended up kind of defining what was 177, which is, it's got a completely different engine, completely different kit. The whole car is different, other than one key part, which was the lower tub. It was a brilliant project to be involved in. And the most satisfying thing about the program is professional drivers, when they drive them, just seem to kind of, the car hits the spot from the point of view of driver enjoyment. I actually had one of my best experiences of my life when we came over to the States, actually, and there was a Michelin event at Thermal over in Palm Springs, and there was one of the customers' cars was based at Thermal. And because it was a Michelin event, there was kind of it was over a couple of days, and there was meals every evening. And at one point, there was Ben Collins, who was doing the kind of the drives during the day and doing passenger laps. And Ben Collins gets out the car, and Alan McNish, the Le Mans legend, is going, "What's it like? What's it like?" And Ben's like, "It's amazing. It's amazing." He was like, "Well, have a go." And he goes, "Well, I can't, because I'm contracted to Audi. I will literally, I could get fired. Like, I cannot get in that car." So later on, we're all walking to dinner, and then Alan McNish looks at me and he goes, "Can I have a drive now? No one's there." And I was like, "Yeah." So the two of us wandered back to the car, and he was wearing all his kind of outfit for eating dinner in. So he was kind of in a pair of chinos and boat shoes and a polo shirt. And I was similarly dressed, and we just stuck on a pair of helmets off this stand for kind of like, Billy helmets on them. And he literally drove the car until it ran out of fuel. Absolutely loved it. In the pitch black, it was the best, one of the best driving experiences I've ever witnessed. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's a great project. We've got a question from someone, and you can discuss what you can. But there's some people that are quite excited about the new opportunity with Lauren Stroll, who's working on Aston Martin and has a lot of passion for taking great brands to great places with a good luxury approach. He's got a pretty great track record, and he's entering Aston Martin in a big way. What do you guys think about Aston Martin going back into Formula One? Just personal, off the record, feelings. Maybe Simon, you can chat about that.
I think it's great. Formula One is frankly it's an enormous billboard, isn't it? The races. I think there are 22 Formula One races, of which 20 countries have an Aston Martin dealership in them. And I mean, you'll have noticed, looking at the Red Bull car with the Aston Martin sponsorship on it, we very carefully placed the Aston Martin sponsorship so that when the camera views were on the car, you would see the word Aston Martin, and it's a great way for us to build our brand and to actually have the genuine connection of now being an Aston Martin Works Formula One team, and to have the Aston Martin colours on the car. It's really exciting, and Lawrence coming into the business is brilliant. You touched on his luxury experience. For me, having come from more than 20 years in automotive retail, to have an executive chairman who has automotive retail experience, has come from he owns a very successful Ferrari dealership, and he knows what it's like to deal with customers, frankly, is great. And so I think the combination of him coming in and the link with his Formula One team is going to be great for us as a company in the long term.
Fraser, how do you feel about it?
I think it's really good. Again, kind of echoing all the things that Simon's just said, I think it just feels a lot more real, having the kind of the branding on the car when there is a kind of a direct link to the company. I think that obviously it's been a great exercise in marketing the brand, having the sponsorship on the Red Bull vehicles, but I will feel more kind of comfortable cheering on Aston Martin next year than I have done over the past few years, because it will feel like it's actually an Aston Martin.
Yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of talk in the world. There's been a lot of interesting driver shifts when some of the teams, even as of today, I believe. I can't wait to see who's going to drive for Team Aston Martin. It's definitely quite neat, and so we'll definitely have to watch the news and see how everything progresses. But I think we're going to come to an end. We really want to say thank you as well for taking your precious time and giving us an insight into what's going on in the world of Aston Martin and some of these great projects you've worked on in the past. It's quite fun, and I definitely encourage those who have not owned an Aston Martin to to check it out and maybe buy something that's unique or commission something that's special. It's certainly a very memorable and fun journey to say I want something quite special. If it's the nail polish I love on my body, my DBX, or if it's something quite odd, they could probably make it a reality. But thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you guys hopefully in the paddock at a Formula One race, or at the factory on a tour, or simply on a visit to join us at Miller Motorcars in the near future.
Well, I think I'm going to have to come and pay a visit to Miller's very soon. So as soon as we get out of this lockdown and I can get on an aeroplane, I'll come over.
Yeah, we'd love to have you, and Fraser, we hope to have you as well. I know you're very busy every day working on so many different projects, but you're much appreciated for joining us as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Evan.
So, until next time, we'll see you guys soon.
Okay.
Have a good one. Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
very much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.